Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our How to Approach the New VCE Study Design with VISCOM webinar this afternoon. My name is Emma Kapler, and I'm the Victorian Education Sales Manager here at Cambridge University Press. Before I make a start, in the spirit of reconciliation, Cambridge University Press and Assessment acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. This webinar is being recorded and you will receive a link to the recording along with the opportunity to give your feedback on your experience this evening. You can expect to see this arrive in your inbox within a week. You can ask questions in the chat box, which we'll be monitoring throughout the webinar. Or if you'd prefer to wait until the end, you can ask any question during the Q&A session with the author. It's important to note that this evening's webinar does have a large number of attendees and there will be limited time for the Q&A. So please do feel comfortable to add any question in the chat box. Now, I'm going to be detailing the publication dates and sample dates, some pricing and some purchasing options at the end of the webinar. So do please stay tuned for this. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to our highly esteemed author of the VISCOMM textbook, speaking this afternoon, Jacinta Patterson. Jacinta is an experienced visual communication design teacher who has taught in a variety of independent and Catholic secondary schools. She's currently the head of learning area for the arts at Ivanhoe Grammar. Jacinta has significant experience with the curriculum development and design, including working in the roles of panel chair, chief assessor and state reviewer for VCAR. She's an active member of Visual Communication Victoria Teachers Association, presenting at both Units 1 to 4 seminars and annual conferences. Jacinta has assisted in running presentations for teachers on the Unit 3 and 4 folio for VCAR and has also been actively involved with the Top Designs program. She's married to a specialist maths teacher and has 3 teenage sons, 2 cats, a parrot and a spoiled dachshund, so I'm told. I'm now going to hand you over to Jacinta. Thank you.
Hello everyone and welcome to this short video on an introduction and a celebration of the latest edition of VISCOMM. This latest edition of VISCOMM does follow the new study design that is accredited from 2024, that's next year, until 2028. Disclaimer, the VCA does not endorse or make any warranties regarding this presentation. The new study design and associated resources can be accessed directly at the VCA website, and look out because there's amazing resources coming your way just to support this new study design. So big hello, my name is Jacinta Patterson and welcome to this latest edition of VISCOMM. I'm a mum of 3 boys, married to a specialist maths teacher, so proud of that, lover of cats, insane lover of cats. And I also teach at Ivanhoe Grammar School where I just love the students I work with, co-ed, and also the amazing staff. They keep me alive. So I just wanted to start off with something and just talk about why design matters and that design does matter. For me, the new VCD study design, I think, has really grown up and it addresses some of these things on the screen that we can see, such as there's a real emphasis on students spending time discovering and defining problems that matter. Time allocated to finding design problems and discovering what users need. The new study design is aligned to the real world, asking students to address things like human-centered research methods and a more human-centered approach to design. Also looking at more opportunities for inclusive design, opportunities for circular design. There's also new terminology that is more relevant to both tertiary and industry. I guess over the last year, there's been a lot of talk about the new study design, and yeah, I've heard of some fears that teachers might have, such as it's more theory-based. Well, I'm hoping that after this presentation and after you see the new edition of the textbook, you'll realise it's not more theory-based. Drawing definitely has not gone. Drawing is still such an important part of our study. Unit 3, Outcome 1, has often been like a challenge that Year 12 teachers have to get through every term one. Hoping that the way it's now set out will be a lot easier to manage, and the textbook, this new edition, does really support that and hopefully gives you lots of ideas that you can do. I guess with any course, how am I going to fit it all in? The new study design is actually opportunities where you might have one topic or one theme. So there's an opportunity, for example, with Unit 1, where you might teach the 3 outcomes individually, or you might blend them or connect them some way. So there's all these great opportunities to, make things fit your teaching style, and more importantly, to suit your students. There is Indigenous content, and there are resources in this textbook to help you out. Technical drawing is still there. And is there less designing in the design process? No, it's pretty much the same, but there are these opportunities now for students to really spend time discovering the needs of the users before they move forward. So some things haven't changed, and we've decided to keep a lot of some content from the previous edition, because we felt it was really important, especially for teachers that are new to the study design or have only been teaching it for a while. Some things, as I said, haven't changed, so students are still going to be engaging with the design process. There is still design thinking. There is still that important skill of developing and applying skills in drawing, making, using a range of media materials, methods and techniques. And also our elements and principles are still very much relevant. Students will still be looking at ethical, legal, sustainable and culturally appropriate design practices. They'll be looking at design's influence and influence on design, including design history and the movements in design. And finally, students will still be delivering and receiving critical feedback using appropriate design terminology. New content. Yep, the design process has been updated. Students will now spend time, especially in Unit 1, really trying to engage with concepts of good design and understanding what good design is. They'll be looking at human-centered design practices, including inclusive design. We have a new field of design practice called interactive experiences, and also what was once called industrial design is now referred to as objects, and we have fashion that's been brought back in, which I know a lot of people are excited about. There's an addition of the Gestalt principles of visual perception. Please don't worry about them. They're an awful lot of fun, and once you get to know them, you'll probably wonder why we were never referring to them in the first place. As I've mentioned already, there's circular design, and also there's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures in design practice. For me, I've looked at a lot of influential designers, and I just wanted to nominate 3 on this slide here that I've used or referred to quite a lot when writing this latest edition of the textbook. Dita Rams, absolute legendary industrial designer, very famous for writing the 10 Principles of Good Design. Seriously cool. Don Norman, he's argued to be the father of user experience design, and hopefully we all know his book, The Design of Everyday Things. Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Ellen is someone that was new to me when I started working on this book, but she has amazing work all on circular design and a really good book that I will refer to later. So there's 3 people that you can spend some time starting to do a bit of research and looking up. The textbook has oodles of designers that I've had the privilege of connecting with and interviewing. It's probably one of the favourite parts of writing this book was connecting with these people. So there's a lot there that you can see that will help you and your students specifically in Unit 3. What else does that textbook cover? Well, this textbook cover, let's see, the design process, obviously. So we deliberately have the beginning of every chapter showing you how that unit of work, how that area of study relates to what stages of the design process. And also there's a lot of like ways that you can refer to and use the stage of the design process as well. Lots of activities, lots of explanation. Just a couple little things about our new design process model. I know when I first looked at it, I went, ooh, but please unpack it, and you will realise that you're not required to spend an equal amount of time in each of these 4 stages. The design process here is still iterative, so students can go backwards and forwards. And just a bit of a highlight or a bit of a plug for the Discover stage. It's really quite exciting, and I sort of think, why weren't we always doing the Discover stage? So the Discover stage, as I was just trying to sort of allude to, often in the past our students walk straight into a project without spending enough time researching the problem, finding opportunities, and finding communication needs worthy of solving. And the Discover stage helps our students to avoid this. So the textbook is going to provide you lots of direction to assist students with this stage, including ways to undertake human-centered research and divergent thinking strategies. The Define stage. So in the Define stage, students are going to do 2 things. One, they're going to synthesize and unpack, find patterns, reframe problems, all based on the work they've done in the previous stage. Then, when they're ready, they will then write their brief. If it's an outcome you're working on that might be in, I don't know, Unit 1 or 2, where you are giving the students a handout, they can still very much do these 2 stages, and maybe they're going to use these stages to either unpack the brief that you've given them, or perhaps even write a return brief. As I said, at the end of this stage, specifically in Unit 3, they will write their own brief. Then we hit the Develop stage, and the Develop stage is quite a big one, and it's a little bit like our old generation of ideas. So students are going to look back on the work that they've done in the Discover and Define stage, and off they go. And this is divergent thinking at its best. This is just letting it all out. This is generating ideas, brainstorming, rapid drawings, iterate, iterate, iterate. Tell you all that I'm going to take iterate, iterate, iterate with me into my classroom. This is where it's meant to be a bit crazy, brain dumps, just getting it all down. The students might use some making methods such as low fidelity prototyping, not final ones. It's about testing a little bit, but it's creating, recreating, etc. They'll sort of finish off this, they will finish off this stage by doing a critique. Now that's something new to this study. Critiques are not as big as a pitch. Critiques are done at this early stage, group of small people, sharing ideas, where you're at, to just get that little bit of feedback to help with that further development. Then we get into our last stage. And as I said to you, you don't spend equal amounts of time in each of the 4 stages. So for some students, and also for some of the projects you might ask your students to do, they might actually spend a long time in this stage. So what they're going to do, they're going to pick up where they left off after doing that critical thinking and sharing ideas with their critiques. And they will pick up convergent thinking and start to really reflect on ideas from that critique they've done. This is, rather than iterate, 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 this is where they're actually going to come in, further testing, iterations, evaluations, further testing, iterations, evaluations. This is where we start to see their work become a little bit more grown up. They become a little bit better at any methods and use of media and materials. They're working harder with their elements and principles, and also making, higher quality prototypes that they will use in a pitch, especially if that's in Unit 4. And then finally, they end up making those polished, finished design solutions. So fields of design practice, we now have 4, so welcome interactive experiences, and the textbook does cover all of these 4 fields of design in various chapters. I guess on that note, I hope that if you were to use the textbook, that you wouldn't work through it from chapter 1 all the way through to chapter 13. Yes, it does make sense to do that, but I would hope that you'd be dipping in and out of all the chapters, and really encourage you to pull lots of exercises out and create your own. Anyway, the design field. So communication design, we now refer to it as messages. And that covers everything from brand strategy, wayfinding, advertising, publications, package design, and even animation and visual effects, which I think is pretty exciting. Then we move into objects, which was once called industrial design. And in here, we've got products, furniture fitting, and also notice package design. So that's another thing you're going to notice with the new study design. There's been a shift from those rigid lists that we had to learn off by heart, those perfect list of the purposes, the perfect list of final presentations. And there are some blurring, but that's so we don't become too fixed, because let's face it, I know that some of you have been frustrated by the fact that why is this sitting here when it could also sit there? So back to objects, another exciting thing here also is fashion, which is pretty cool. Environments are still called environments. Not a lot here has changed. But one thing I really love seeing is game design. And imagine you might have students working on buildings and architecture that sit inside virtual reality or sit inside a game. So this is pretty much the same. Again, growing up a little bit more open. Our new baby, interactive experiences. Please don't worry about this stepping on the toes of of IT. And when you see the word wireframing, you might instantly think, oh, that's what we do in media. So this is interactive experiences, and it's looking at students designing ways that users or customers will interact with a digital interface. So this could cover anything from touch points, wayfinding systems, interfaces encountered in physical or digital places such as apps online. Imagine, creating interfaces at a train station, perhaps signage and wayfinding around a zoo. There's so much here that students can do. Some key takeaway points for this are things like using wireframing to design solutions, also icon designs as well, which is pretty exciting. So new terms in our study. Let's see. So there's good design, which I did mention early on. As a starting point, just check out the Victorian Premier's Design Awards as a starting point. Really good examples of what good design is. And the other great thing about the Victorian Premier's Design Awards website is that it does talk about certain design criteria, and there's also, it talks about design processes. So good design is really addressed in chapter 2 quite extensively, with a bit of a history right up to contemporary stuff. Human-centered design, pretty much it's about involving the stakeholders, which is another slide that's coming up. But stakeholders is more than just the target audience. It's all the people that are involved in the design process. So one design company that is referred to in the textbook is Local Peoples, and they do human-centered design or user-centered design just beautifully. So it's about involving people, the clients, the end users, even other designers through every stage of the design process. Stakeholders, as I've just mentioned, they're the people involved during the design process, including the designer, the client, the audience, the users. So it's anyone who will be impacted by the project or involved in a project. Critiques and pitches, yep, we've got them both now. So the critique sits early on, typically in that develop stage, after students have started to generate ideas, and before they go too far, let's stop and critique those ideas. And then the design pitch is pretty much the same thing that we've been seeing in our Unit 3. Both of these are addressed in the new textbook with examples and even some handouts and things that can help students manage this work. Finally, circular design. As I mentioned earlier, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, or Ellen herself, has done beautiful work here, and there's lots of resources here as well. So circular design is looking at the whole life cycle of a product or a message or a building, whatever it may be, and what happens before and at the end of that product's life. Assessment tasks. Okay, so a lot of fun here. So Unit 1, we start off, it's reframing design problems. Yep, there's no drawing here. This is pretty much about students understanding at the very beginning of our unit, at the very beginning of our VCE, we actually get to spend time with students and teach them to identify design problems, to understand what good design is, to learn about how to research and reframe design problems. At the end of this unit, students will present a couple of things to you, work that's done collaboratively, where they're learning about concepts of good design and human-centered research, etc. And then finally, they do their own work where they write a brief themselves. So it's setting out working collaboratively on what are notions of good design, lots of opportunities that you can do. And things that you can address or how to address this are all available in the textbook. Everything from creating good and bad walls of design right down to advice on how to write a design brief. So that's a lot of fun, and it makes so much sense that we actually teach our students to recognise and understand what good design is and how to do good research and how to define problems. Then we move into branding, and this is quite familiar. This whole outcome will feel very familiar to a lot of you because it's straight up branding. It's understanding the use of visual language. Students will create a folio of work and also then present to you an example solutions for a brand. You know what? If you wanted to, you could actually, if we go back one, you could actually ask your students here in the area study 1 to end up writing something, a design brief of some sort here that would mean that they could continue into this next outcome and actually do the branding. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where you can find clever ways to perhaps combine or link outcomes to help manage workloads. The third outcome in Unit 1 is students are going to actually be looking at influences of design and how it influences circular design practices, etc. And they're actually going to create a folio of work and develop their own object using a circular design practice to design something that is sustainable. Sorry, getting a bit tongue-tied here. So this is a really exciting outcome as well. So there's no reason, as I said, that you might get the students to initially write a brief, branding, object, and you could link them. In this outcome here, students will do some of their technical drawing associated with objects. Unit 2, we launch straight into some really great design history, and students will look at movements in design, specifically bringing those back to environmental design. They will look at technical drawings associated with environmental design, divergent, convergent thinking, methods, media, materials, design elements and principles, and they will end up designing their own environmental design solution that might be related to living, play, work, space, etc. So again, this outcome will feel familiar to a lot of you, and it's pretty exciting. Then we move into one that's a bit new, and I know some people might feel nervous about this one, but it starts off and we look at Australian Indigenous design. There's Indigenous designers to look at as well. There's, as well as looking at examples of Indigenous design, this outcome, this area of study requires students to understand and learn about culturally appropriate design practices and protocols for using Indigenous work or referring to Indigenous work. And the textbook has a lot of information here and a lot of resources to support that. Students will then prepare a written analysis where they will analyse how Indigenous artists and designers represent their stories and communicate messages through symbols and icons. And then the second part of this outcome, the second part of this assessment task, is that they will go on to create their own personal icons. Now, a student might be very happy to do something like record their day and create icons for that day. Maybe they don't really want to create icons for themselves. They could create personal icons for a friend, for a pet. There's options there. They could also use their understanding and their knowledge of the types of icons that Indigenous people make and create, and you know, the ideas behind those, and they could bring that into their own work. So it's a really exciting outcome. It is not one to be worried about. There are so many resources to support you in this new content, as well as more resources coming from VCA. In the last outcome or area of study for Unit 2, it's designing interactive experiences. And this is a really nice flow on because in the previous outcome, students were looking at icons, and again, they get to use that work of icons in this particular area of study as well. And they will be actually designing or proposing an interface for an interactive digital product, an environment or service. So there's so much they could do there. They're going to get to use things like wireframing. This is the time where the Gestalt principles of perception just shine, because those principles really do encourage students to look at layout and composition. So this is a really great unit of work. Then we move into Unit 3, and there's a lot the same, and there's been some tidying up. So in the past, we started with analysis and then doing lots of practical work. Then we moved into design industry. It's kind of swapped. So we start off where we get our students to look at the design industry. They will select 2 designers and complete a comparative case study. And it could be done as a report, annotated report, could be visual as well as written. You might choose to set it under test conditions. You've still got all these great opportunities. Now, just a little bit of note there. Students can now choose if they want to. So you might have a student that decides at the very beginning of year 12, they want to work in communication. Sorry, I knew I was going to slip up. That they might like to work in the field of messages for the whole year. So for their 2 designers, they might pick 2 designers that work in messages. So maybe a graphic designer and a brand strategist, or a graphic designer and a photographer, or 2 graphic designers, as long as the work that those 2 graphic designers do is different. Otherwise, there's not going to be a lot to compare. Or you might have a student that wants to choose a graphic designer and an architect. So just be aware that you can have a student choosing to work in that one field, and you'll just have to make sure that and help them and ensure that if they do choose 2 designers from messages, that the work that they're doing is different enough to make those comparisons. Then they finish up after they've done that, and they do 2 exercises that document their learning or show evidence of their learning. And again, now it's exercises, and it's only 2. So for example, if we stay in this messages field, you might have a student that creates 3 pages, folio pages, generating ideas for a logo. They don't have to finish it. It's not a finished piece of work. You might have a student that's working in environmental, and they might do a render perspective drawing and a simple floor plan with 1 elevation. Or they might make a tiny little model. It's 2 exercises, and that's it. All right, moving into the next outcome. Now it's design analysis time. So again, you might have a student that wants to stay in the field that they've already been working in. And again, you just need to help them out, that they will pick 2 examples of visual communications, 2 design examples, so that they can really do a comparison on. So, you know, you try and avoid a student selecting 2 posters for a music festival. Rather, you might say you're going to choose a music festival poster, and you're going to choose, you know, a website for a primary school. Just something really, really different. If students are going to work out of 2 fields, then it's going to be a lot easier. But ideally what they're doing here is they're finding 2 examples of visual communications, which is how we referred to it in the past, 2 design examples, and they're going to do a comparative analysis on those. And this time it's very similar to the last outcome, where they've got a choice. It could be a written report, it can be an annotated report with images, or you may choose to ask your students to do this under a test. Then we hit the SATfolio. So very similar to our current SATfolio, other than students are going to spend a lot more time in that initial discover stage, where many of our students sort of whip through very quickly. So they're going to really spend time in that discover stage, finding out about the design problems, researching them, trying to identify opportunities and needs. Then they move into the define stage, where they're going to massage or synthesize their research and end up writing a brief. And then students in this area of study will dip into, or will move into, the 3rd stage of the design process, which is develop, where they will do lots of generation of ideas for both, for 2 communication needs, referring to their brief. They will, at the end of this stage, present and critique ideas for both of their communication needs, and start to respond to that. Then they're going to move into Unit 4. And Unit 4, they spend their whole time in the deliver stage, unless, of course, they need to dip back to go back and redevelop something. Goodness, maybe even go back and do a bit more discovery. So remember, our design process is still iterative. So in this Unit 4 stage, they will have chosen concepts for both presentations or both communication needs. They will be polishing, they will be evaluating, testing, resolving, becoming more skillful in the use of media, methods, materials, and just like currently in Unit 4, they will devise a pitch one design concept for each of their communication needs, get feedback, finish up refining, and of course then make their finals, which is the last area of study, is their finals. So this is very similar to our current design, study design. So just want to finish off and thank you for listening to me waffle on. I wasn't quite sure what to present here, but further resources, please watch out. VCA have got so much coming your way and it's pretty exciting stuff. Also watch out for the VCA implementation briefings, and VCV, as always, give us so much, and they've got workshops and seminars coming as well. And to finish off, really want to share with you the books that just supported my writing, and I just love them. Okay, anything by Ellen Lupton you can get your hands on is not a bad buy. So a couple of, or the book on the left, I think most of us know. The Extra Bold is her latest one, and the book is just beautiful to hold. So anything she writes, grab it. Okay, design, think, make, break, and repeat. If you need something new, you want some new design thinking, some new convergent, divergent thinking routines, this book is amazing. In the middle, I just wanted to photograph it because the book is stunning to hold. It's Alan MacArthur's Foundation, and it's all her circular design for fashion, and it is just a divine book. So please grab that one. How to Research Trends has been out for a long time, but again, it's got some really great tools in there. These three books, couldn't live without them. Design Emergency in the middle has, I just couldn't believe it when I picked it up and bought it. It has a brilliant chapter on the COVID symbol and how that was designed, and talks a lot about how sometimes you have to design something very, very quickly. What is good design, if not designing for good, is an awesome book as well, and that's relatively new. I think I got that at the end of last year. Finishing off, Design Teaching, probably not for the kids, probably for the staff room rather than the library, but it's Meredith Davis. Anything she writes is perfect. So again, grab anything that she writes, and it's absolutely a wonderful book. First Knowledges, they're a series, I think, of 3 books. This is Building on Country, and it's just awesome. Alison Page, anything that she writes, that just do a Google, she writes amazing stuff. And Paul, I've actually just bought the other day, he's put out a really large book on Aboriginal architecture, and it's just divine. And of course, there's our Design of Everyday Things, Don Norman, so much fun to read. And if you don't have time, just Google Norman doors. It's a great way to start about what is good design. So thanks for tuning in, and I believe I will be coming on shortly to answer any of your questions. See ya.
Okay, so thank you, Jacinta. So it's now time for our Q&A session. So, and some questions have started to come in now. I'm going to start with the first question, and hopefully we'll get through some of these. So we've got a few coming in. Now, the first one, when you say icons, do you mean hand-drawn or digital?
Well, that can be actually both. So it's time now, like icons have been mentioned before in our study, but it is now time for students to understand that they can be different to logos, different to symbols, but definitely icons. And there's 2 units or 2 areas of study where students will be working with icons. They could be done manually or digitally.
Perfect. Okay, so question here. Is there an insight into the chapter breakdown? Are we able to have the book references in a list when the video link gets distributed? So that's possibly the sample pages I think they're referring to, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But did you want to talk about that one? Or do you want me to read it again?
Yeah, just you broke up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. So is there an insight into the chapter breakdown? Are we able to have the book references in a list when the video link gets distributed, please? That's your book list, your book references in your presentation.
Yeah. I guess we could certainly look into that. There is, in the teacher resource, there's a great table with a breakdown of all of the areas of study, the outcomes, and all the different ways that you can address that with all the activities. I did at the end share with you all some of my favourite books and some of my favourite resources that really have underpinned the writing. They're not really all mentioned in the textbooks. Some of them are, with suggestions of further reading, because when writing the book, it was more for the students. So the books that I've just shared with you today would be perhaps ones that you would take on board to further your reading, your knowledge. They're a lot of fun.
Excellent. I'm also wondering about selecting design fields for the final folio. What does this look like now that there are 4 to choose from?
Yeah, that one took me a while to get my head around as well. So pretty much we have 4 fields of design, and there was a lot of talk and a lot of thought, and even at one point maybe that we weren't even going to list fields of design in the new study design. There was a really big push to move away from lists of things. For those people out there that mark exams, we know how pedantic it can get with, ensuring that this is mentioned and that is mentioned according to these lists we have. So I guess things like even purposes, you'll notice that yes, purposes are still in the study design, but there isn't going to be that definitive list that students have to know. So with that sort of thought in mind, we have landed, or the VCA have landed on 4 design fields of practice. So what happens when you get to year 12? Yes, you could have a student that will pick one field and just work in that all year. So you might have a student that works in what was called communication design, which is now called messages. They may work in that all year, base their whole folio on it. You may have a student that might still want to work with messages and objects. So objects has replaced industrial design. Again, that's up to the student, but I think there's going to be a lot of responsibility on us as teachers to help our students make those informed choices at the beginning of Unit 3. It would be absolutely wonderful if all of our students did do Units 1 and 2 before they did 3 and 4, but that's not necessarily the case. I know that at my school, I get students that walk into 3-4 without having done 1-2. So that will become part of our, I guess, mentoring side of teaching, is helping our students select at the beginning which field or fields they want to work in. And that might be doing some classic stuff like maybe we spend a week showcasing the fields of design, creating walls. I remember when the current study design first came out, where we all did we would do sort of butcher's paperwork, getting our students to identify what goes on in those 3 fields. So perhaps that's what we're going to have to do to get it started. I hope I've answered that question.
Very good. Now there's a question here. Will there be teacher resources or a teacher resource pack to buy like the textbook? So yes, there certainly will be. And Jacinta, do you know what is covered in the teacher resources?
Absolutely. The biggest thing I wanted to say about the teacher resource is that, and it was my push, and I did it with the previous edition as well, is I wanted it all to be Word documents or PowerPoints so that you can change it. The last thing I wanted was something that you couldn't unpack or change. And that's another thing with the textbook as well. The way it's been written is that you can dip in, sure, at the end of every chapter, there is a task to address the VCA outcome. There's even like an extended one, but everything has been written so that you can go in and pull and pick and create your own, because it's really important. The way I teach might be very different to how you teach. My students are different to your students. So having that ownership of creating your own assessment tasks, that's pretty much how I was writing the textbook, and that's how the teacher resource has been written.
Excellent. How many criterion are in the SAT folio? When will Unit 3 be due?
I know. Do you know what? I actually don't know that. That part has not been done yet. So the study design was written last year, published this year. The advice for teachers has been written, and that was done last term, but that is just going through the final stages of being proofed. It's really exciting. The advice for teachers is really cool. There was 3 people that wrote that. So many ideas. Look forward to that. We're currently going through working with Kathy Hendy-Eakers, a small team of people, and we are doing webinars. So I did one last week with Kathy for Unit 1. They're all coming your way, and they're really good as well. So that's pretty exciting.
Very good. Now, how will that end in the exam if they concentrate on one field?
I know. Sorry. Too many animated. I realised I didn't actually finish answering that question, the previous one. So the SAT folio, that's the last part now, is actually finalising that assessment. So I don't know, and that will be another team of people. Like, it takes a huge team of people to write this study design and all the things that go with it. So I'm not sure when that information will be available in regards to the SAT. In regards to the exam, what was really wonderful when the study design was being written was we were asked to forget about the exam and just spend time really creating a wonderful study that was relevant. So the exam is currently being worked on right now. I'm not involved with that because I teach Year 12s. And hopefully by the end of the year or early next year, there will be a sample exam like what has happened with the previous study design. Obviously, there will be a lot of things you can probably put 2 and 2 together. If you've got a student that is going to be working in all messages in Unit 3 and 4, they don't have any experience in technical drawing. Obviously, that can't appear on the exam. Perhaps the exam will end up being something like, maybe it could be like a section B might be 3 options. The students might select the one that's relevant to their field. Perhaps that won't happen. Perhaps it will be a question where students get to maybe answer a question that's relevant to what they've done. This is me just speculating. All I can say is that if you look at your key knowledge and your key skills from Unit 3 and 4, that's what they base the exam on. And obviously, it's going to have to be quite different. But again, I wouldn't be stressing about that right now, because just know that VICA are well and truly all over it, and it'll be fine. But we can't help but wonder, can we?
Next question. Do you have a chapter on exam revision? How do you expect the exam to run if students are able to specialise during Units 3 and 4?
So that, I feel like I've answered part of that question. So yes, unfortunately, there is a tiny chapter on the exam at the end. As I didn't have any information on what the exam might look like, it's a little bit different. It's more about how do you go about, exam preparation, what to do during exam time. And the teacher resource, something similar, but we will be having, once we have that exam information, so you'll get it at the same time as me, I'll be brave enough to write a sample exam and solutions, and that will be added to the teacher resource at a later date.
Sounds good. If a student bases Unit 3 and 4 on one design field, how will that impact on the end of year external exam?
Yeah, so the same thing. The exam is going to change. It's going to be very, very different to what we currently see. So, things like, I don't know, because I can't predict. I wish I had a crystal ball, but just knowing how VICA works, and we all know this, so we've all got this same information, is that exams are written based on Unit 3 and 4 key knowledge and key skills. Obviously not all of it. Can't examine all of it in one 90-minute paper. I can only speculate like you can. So obviously, there couldn't be a technical drawing question, like an orthogonal drawing question, because not all students have done that. So, but again, we will get information provided to us, and you're more than welcome to reach out to Kathy Hendy-Eakers and find out how it's all going. But we'll get that information.
Next question is, will there also again be a tech specs guideline or guide to baseline those field drawing methods?
Yeah, absolutely. The old technical drawing spec document. Again, I'm not sure how that's going to work in relation to the exam. My understanding is that that will also be looked at. I think that perhaps the inclusion of technical flats might need to go in. But again, there'll be another panel that will look at that. But I wonder whether its significance or its importance will be as strong as in the past because, you know, as we know, we may have some students that won't use it at all.
Okay. Would there be hang on, sorry, let me start again. Would there be specific examples for what is included in each design field? For example, what does messages include, etc.?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely in there. So there's loads and loads of examples like that. So I'm hoping that by the time you've looked through it all, you'll have a clear understanding of what messages is, objects, environments, and of course our new one, interactive experiences. And don't worry about that. I probably had the same questions as some of you might have. Is that stepping into IT a bit? It's not. So the whole digital interactive experiences is, some of our students are already doing it when they're designing apps or websites. So they're looking at the way, you know, those sort of digital platforms move and how people navigate through them and using, you know, layout, grids, type, icons. It's going to be a really fun area. And remember that they don't have to be working prototypes like something that might happen in IT.
What are your thoughts on combining units 3, outcome 1 and 2? They seem similar and like they work together. For example, students could look at 2 designers and their designs to compare in the written part, then do their design exercises, ?
You know what? I learned something really valuable. I did a benchmarking report a couple of years ago for the study, and I learned the difference between a curriculum and a syllabus. And what's really cool about our study design is it's simply that. It's a study design, and then we as teachers need to use that to guide us in designing what we're going to teach and how we're going to assess it. So we have our guidelines. So that means that we can combine some of the outcomes. And I'm glad you've brought this up, whoever you are. It's a really good one. And I am currently thinking about what to do. So SAC 1, there's been a tiny swap around of how we do it. And also, can I also say, I feel like VICA have been really good in responding to a lot of teachers, you know, concerns around the current SAC 1 and how it feels like a race every year to get through all that content. So there has been a response to that to reduce that workload. So the idea is that in SAC 1, you start off by looking at the design industry. I would probably be definitely, because remember, as I mentioned, I often have students that come in at unit 3 without doing 1, 2. I would probably be doing some work on the design industry, showing the students what they are. We might all do that, then allowing students to pick it. So then they do their comparative analysis of 2 designers. So if they're deciding to work completely in messages, you want to help your students pick 2 designers that have different roles in that field of messages. Maybe they're working on the same project, but they do different things. Otherwise, if they're just comparing, let's say, a graphic designer and a graphic designer who are doing similar work, it's not going to be a really, you know, thoughtful or engaging analysis. And then after they've done that, they then get to select 2 small practical exercises to have a bit of a crack at some of the practical work that they've just learnt about. And then they move into SAC 2, which is the design analysis task, where they pick, again, 2 designers, but it's their work. They pick 2 examples of work to compare and analyse. So yes, there's wonderful opportunities to overlap that, perhaps make that into a sort of a slightly bigger project, because as some of us know, some of us have often done a theme for area of study 1 to try and get through all that workload. So you could definitely do that. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. When would you be teaching software and similar? Does this take place in Unit 1 and Unit 2?
I started in Year 8. So, I think that's the success we have. It's a bigger thing. So even what our students do in PDT, we have PDT art, we have textiles. So we've actually got that big picture thing. So it's not as scary. By the time we get them in year 11 and 12, it seems to work. Of course, you get a student that comes in at unit 3, they've never picked up any design software, and you just hold on tight, don't you? Suck it in. You give them a whole lot of recorded videos. You ask them to look at those over the summer break, ask them to upskill. You sit them next to somebody else in the classroom who's got those skills that will share, and usually they get to pick it up. But when it comes to software, our approach and what seems to work for us is getting it in as early as possible. We're also pretty select. We made a decision about what programs we wanted. We realised we can't teach it all. So yeah, I hope I've answered that. So definitely our year 11s are doing it, but the same software. We won't be changing our approach with the new study design. We'll still be teaching the same software, and they're doing it. When it comes to VCD, they learn about it in year 8. They have a huge project there where we introduce it to them. They then keep it going in year 9. They build on the skills in year 10, etc., etc. I think that's, yeah, you've got to do something like that.
Very good. Now, this might be a question for me, actually. Will Cambridge be releasing uncorrected sample pages? When can we expect them? So you can actually expect them in the next few days, maybe even as early as tomorrow. So just look out for a notification from us, and you'll be able to view them online. Next question. What will be your approach to teachers who are lucky enough to be audited when we are starting a new study design? Will there be some understanding of new content and trial and error?
Yeah. Look, I do know a little bit about auditing because I was state reviewer for quite a long time. Don't be scared of the audits. Just give them everything you've got. It's not about tripping you up. If I was going to be audited first up, you've got a wonderful textbook. I'm allowed to sell it, aren't I? But the biggest tip is that my textbook is available. It is given to VCA. They have a copy of it. But actually, this is no different to sometimes when I present for VCV or other things. My biggest tip is just don't take what you see out of the textbook and photocopy that and give it to them. So, you are going to be lucky enough to get a lot of this in the teacher resource as Word documents. Pull it apart, make it your own, put your little spin on it, and you shouldn't have a problem. But, we're all going to be trialing and error. It's all going to be trial and error next year. I've been lucky enough. I didn't have a summer holidays last summer. Can I just make you all have a bit of a laugh? I gave my beautiful publisher, Harriet, my final chapter as I was in Port Fairy. The boys and Steve were all off surfing. I had the dash hound tied to my ankle, camping. I was using the last of my hotspotting data on my phone to email Harriet the last chapter. So even though I've got my head around it, I'm still very much looking forward to working with my colleagues to plan out what we're going to do and how it's going to work. So yeah, don't be too hard on yourself. Don't worry about audits.
Thank you. Is it bad to be prescriptive about which fields of design practice students focus on?
Yeah, I feel your pain, whoever you are. And I'm still, again, really looking forward to working with my colleagues on how we will approach that. One of them's out there this evening. Hi, Lawrence Delton. A bit of a shout out to you. I don't know. To be honest, I think some of them, we've got to really give them that time where we introduce those fields so that they're aware of it. And sure, I think just like we naturally do, like this year when students were picking folio topics and we gently nudged them in one direction than another. I think it'd be a real shame if we turned into schools, like if we turned this school here into, let's say, the architect expert school and deny students choices of where they might want to go. I think we still have to design courses and do things that suit our students' needs. So I guess to answer your question, there probably will be times where I'll nudge a student in a certain direction than the other. It's no different to the student that said they wanted to design another Marvel character and I had to have that conversation. No, let's do this way. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, coming in now. So from your research and writing of this book, What are some of the key terms related to interface and experiences that we might need to know so we can begin to prepare now?
Yes.
Examples of terms I would think would be relevant include physical and digital interfaces, feedback, signify, sorry.
Signifiers.
Signify, sorry.
I don't think you need to go that deep. No, I don't think you need to go that deep. And perhaps that's, I had to share that Don Norman book with, the red vessel on the front cover. You won't need to go that deep. So everything that in regards to the interactive design, don't be scared by it. You could even have students looking at wayfinding signs and things like that. It will be really, really exciting. So no, we don't need to go that deep. But other bigger terms, if I can sort of step outside of that field of practice, is, we've got things like our human-centered research, but again, don't be scared by it. I think a lot of our students are already doing it. Like, you think about the students that are doing interviews, looking at, recording data, collecting information. So we've got some other things like, your ethical research. Again, don't be scared by terms like that. Being ethical means being, authentic and responsible and honest. So I hope I've answered that question.
All right, we might only have one more question, or time for one more question. I think we're sort of running out a bit of time here. Let me see. So out of curiosity, what programs does Ivanhoe teach? And in brackets, great webinar. Thanks, Jacinta.
I'm really nervous to answer that question because I am very, very grateful for where I work. And I've tried not to do things like that in the textbook as well. So, we use the Adobe Creative Suite. We don't use it all. We don't have time. We made that decision. We don't have time. We do push Illustrator a lot. And so, that's frustrating for when they want to do CAD-like work, because perhaps we should pick that up. But we don't have time to teach it all. And we just made that decision to work in one, really push it and do it well. Of course, students are students and they pick up really cool stuff. So, by the time they get to year 12, there's always someone in my class that's an absolute expert, an absolute gun at Fusion or Blender. I worked out a couple of years ago that students are amazing teachers. So I've been slowly getting my students over the years to create introductory sort of videos. I brief them and I say, all right, can you create me a series of 3 videos? And your brief is, it has to target a year 12 student who's in term 3, really stressed, and suddenly at the last minute wants to use Blender to create blah, blah, blah. So I've slowly been getting, and these kids record them, they love doing it. And so I've got these wonderful sort of instructional videos that a little bit better than some of the American YouTube stuff. So, but I'm very grateful that I have access to Adobe.
Excellent. Okay, so we might have to leave the Q&A there. I've got a couple of slides to share with you all, and then we'll be finishing the webinar. Okay, so availability, we've talked on that a little bit now. So interactive samples of the textbook will be available in the next few days, and I'm pretty sure they're going to be available for you tomorrow, but you will be notified once they are available. So look out for an email from our marketing team. We do have a really informative landing page. You can find that information by typing this into your browser or your URL. This is the URL. That's what I'm trying to say. So you'll find lots of information there. Stock's due early October, which is going to be nice and ready for your early commencement programs as well. I would encourage you, though, if you do want to find out more about the series and have a closer look at the samples in print form, please do contact your Cambridge rep. I'll be sharing their details in the next few slides. Okay, next slide. And here's the pricing for you as well, so, and purchasing options, of course. So print and digital, with the print book, the digital is included. There's a code on the inside of the front cover that can be accessed or activated, I should say. Digital only is an option if you're a digital only school. And then, of course, the teacher resource package. Now, if you do decide to book list our series, we provide complimentary copies of the textbook and the teacher resource package. So get in touch with your rep and let them know so they can order your free copies for you. Next slide. I think this is it. So this is your Cambridge team. I look after the Bayside, Mornington Peninsula areas. You can contact Carolyn. She looks after North. You've got Kim, who looks after East, South East, and then, of course, Marcus, who looks after the West. So I really do encourage you to contact your reps. If you want to have a closer look at the series, they'd be more than happy to run you through that and, of course, organise any complimentary resources should you decide to booklist the resource. That is actually it from us. Thank you very much, Jacinta, for your awesome presentation and for your contribution tonight. We really are truly grateful. And thank you, everyone, for joining us too this evening. Wishing you all a really good night. Thank you.